Here's some key states to look out for tomorrow. The Biden camp thinks Georgia and Texas are in play. Others are saying don't bet the farm on it. Here's a look at the latest poll from CBS News, though. It shows Trump with a small lead in Texas. And right now I want to bring in inside elections reporter and analyst Jacob Rubashkin. Pronounce that for me.
Rubashkin.
Rubashkin, thank you. I need to ask you this first, Jacob. Talk to me about Florida and Pennsylvania. Everybody's talking about those two states. We're not going to know anything from Pennsylvania for quite some time, but what will Florida tell us early on tomorrow night?
Well, Florida is actually pretty good about counting its ballots quickly. They have a robust infrastructure in place to count their early ballots and their mail-in ballots. So we should get fairly quick returns at the beginning of the night. Now, as we all know, Florida is not so great at counting that last percent or 2% of ballots like we saw in 2000 and even in an election like 2012 where it took a day or two to call the race. So if Florida does come down to the line, we may not have a result for quite some time. But certainly if Joe Biden, for instance, is able to carry Florida on the night of the election, he's going to have a pretty good time for the rest of the evening.
Okay, and Pennsylvania, we'll leave that to the side for a second because it's going to take a while to get those votes in. Okay, let's go to Georgia and Texas. Are you and others really serious? I know the Biden campaign is saying they've got a shot there, but is that just all talk at this point?
No, it's the real deal. We actually we view Georgia as highly competitive for the Biden campaign. Perhaps Joe Biden is even a slight favorite in the state of Georgia. And that's truly an incredible thing to say. You know, no Democrat has won Georgia at the presidential level since Bill Clinton in 1992. But what we've seen happen over the last couple years in Georgia with the growth in the suburbs of metro Atlanta, the state becoming much younger, more people moving in, more Black and Latino voters, as well as this suburban shift we've seen over the course of the Trump presidency, where people in educated, wealthier suburbs who traditionally voted Republican for the first time are casting their ballots for Democrats. So
yeah,
you put all that together.
And Stacey Abrams kind of showed Democrats that this can be had if you do certain things, right?
Absolutely. So even though Stacey Abrams did narrowly lose her historic run for governor in 2018, she really showed the Democrats that there was a path to victory in a state like Florida that didn't require kind of the old method of running a moderate, more conservative white man for office, which is how Democrats have tried unsuccessfully to win in the South for several decades now.
Okay, so if Biden can take Georgia, I mean, that's huge. But Texas, that's different. We're talking, what, 28 million people? How many electoral votes are we talking about in Texas?
Texas has well over 38 electoral votes, to be exact. It's the second highest prize after California. It would be even more historic for Biden to win Texas. No Democratic president since Jimmy Carter has won Texas. But a lot of the things we're seeing in Georgia, we're also seeing in Texas. Texas is one of the fastest growing states in the nation. It's a young state. There are new voters there. And there are a lot of wealthy, white, educated suburbs in Texas that are moving towards the Democratic Party. And we really saw that in 2018 when Beto O'Rourke ran for Senate. Again, like Stacey Abrams, he did lose that race, but he showed Democrats that there was a path and that it wasn't just the old path to try and win in Texas, but it was a new path that went straight through these traditionally Republican suburbs.
Let me get you to respond to this. I'm hearing from Republicans. They're cautiously optimistic. They're confident. Most of the Democrats that I know are anxious, if not afraid. 2016 still, in the headlights. Who's right in terms of the thinking here?
Well, we'll know for sure, hopefully tomorrow evening. I think that both parties are looking at data that they are relatively happy with. But I think the thing to remember is that Donald Trump is the serious underdog here, and no kind of PTSD from the 2016 defeat of Hillary Clinton should cover up the fact that Joe Biden is in a really commanding position here. And Republicans are really, really searching hard for silver linings. But it's going to take a lot of things for President Trump to win re-election tomorrow night, and that's the way it is.
All right. Jacob Rubashkin, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Good information.
Thanks.